Did the Roman Empire already solve what the modern world cannot? There is a question that no modern government wants to answer, not because they do not know it, but because the answer reveals exactly how far we have fallen. When was the last time the world had order? Not the illusion of order, not the fragile arrangement of competing powers holding each other at bay with the threat of mutual destruction. Real order, shared law, a civilization that stretched across continents and held, not through fear alone, but through a common understanding of what it meant to be human, to have duty, to build something that would outlast you. The answer is Rome, and the silence that follows that answer should disturb every person alive today. Look at the world we are living in, not through the lens of any single news cycle or political crisis, but from a distance, from the height at which history is written. We have more information than any civilization in human history. We have technology that would appear as magic to every emperor who ever lived. We have weapons capable of ending cities in seconds, and institutions designed specifically to prevent us from using them. We have more wealth, more medicine, more connectivity than Rome could have dreamed of. And yet, nations that have existed for centuries are fracturing along lines their founders thought they had resolved. International institutions built after the bloodiest wars in human history are struggling to enforce the most basic principles they were created to protect. Alliances formed in the shadow of existential threats are dissolving the moment those threats feel distant. The shared frameworks of law, trade, and diplomacy that took 200 years to construct are being questioned in ways that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. We are not in crisis because we lack the tools to solve our problems. We are in crisis because we have lost the philosophy that makes solutions possible. Rome had that philosophy. We abandoned it. Before Rome unified the known world, the landscape of human civilization was what it has always reverted to without a unifying force: brutal, fragmented, and short. Tribes warred over rivers, cities burned over borders that moved with every generation. Trade routes were uncertain, contracts were unenforceable beyond the territory of whoever had the most soldiers that week. There was no shared language, no shared law, no shared vision of what human civilization could become. The ancient world was not romantic, it was desperate. Rome did not merely conquer that world, it organized it. It gave the known world aqueducts and amphitheaters, census records, and civil courts. It built roads that connected Britain to Persia, not for the romance of infrastructure, but because a connected empire was a governable empire, and a governable empire was a safe one. But the deepest thing Rome gave the world was not stone or steel. It was an idea. The idea that a man from Hispania and a man from Syria could stand under the same flag and call themselves citizens of the same civilization. That law was not the property of the powerful. It was the framework within which even the powerful had to operate. That a merchant traveling from Carthage to Londinium did not need to bribe 12 border guards or learn 12 legal systems. He traveled under Roman protection, on Roman roads, with Roman weights and measures, knowing that Roman law would honor his contracts at every stop along the way. That invisible architecture, that shared framework of law, language, and civic duty was not a luxury. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. And it has never been fully replaced. The Romans called it jus gentium, the law of nations, a legal framework that transcended tribe and territory. The radical belief, and it was radical, that every person, regardless of origin, deserves to live under a system that is consistent, just, and enforced. We built our entire concept of international law in their image. The United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the Geneva Conventions, all of it traces back in direct philosophical lineage to the Roman idea that law must be universal or it is not really law at all. We inherited their architecture. We simply forgot to maintain it. The Roman Empire did not fall in a single moment. There was no morning when the gates opened and everything ended. It dissolved, slowly, painfully, over centuries, as the virtues that had built it were quietly abandoned. Discipline gave way to comfort. Civic duty gave way to entitlement. The legions that had once marched through blizzards and deserts began hiring mercenaries to fight in their place. Politicians who had once competed to serve the Republic began competing to extract from it. The pattern is not unique to Rome. It is the pattern of every civilization that has ever reached Rome's height. Not conquest from without, but corrosion from within. The Ottomans did not fall because their enemies were stronger. The British Empire did not end because the world ran out of respect for it. Every great civilization carries within it the seeds of its own undoing, and those seeds are always the same. Comfort mistaken for safety, entitlement mistaken for rights. The slow, quiet decision, made by no one in particular and everyone in general, that the sacrifices of the previous generation no longer apply to this one. Rome saw this coming. The Stoics warned about it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it in his private journal, words never meant to be published, never meant to be read by anyone but himself. A man at the height of human power, writing in the dark about his fear that the thing he was trying to hold together was already coming apart. And Rome fell anyway, because knowing the danger and having the discipline to resist it are two entirely different things. The barbarians did not defeat Rome. Rome defeated Rome. Now look at ourselves. We have built a world of extraordinary individual freedom and almost no shared responsibility. A world where every right is loudly defended and every duty is quietly questioned. Where international institutions speak with great authority and act with great hesitation. Where the language of civilization has been preserved, but the will to enforce it has evaporated. We are not lacking resources. We are not lacking intelligence. We are not lacking technology. What we lack is what Rome had, the philosophical foundation, the shared understanding that civilization is not a default state, it is an achievement, that it requires maintenance, that freedom without virtue is not civilization at all. It is just a more comfortable version of the chaos that preceded Rome. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. Focus on what you can govern, accept what you cannot. Build your life and your civilization around the things that last. Rome built an empire on that idea. We have forgotten it so completely that we must explain it as if it were something new. What would a new Roman philosophy look like? Not as a fantasy of empire, but as a framework for civilization. It would begin with law, universal, consistent, enforced. Not the law of the powerful imposed on the weak, but the law of the civilization, applied equally to everyone within it. Jus gentium, the law of nations, the thing we built and then stopped believing in. It would demand virtus, not politeness, not the passive virtue of avoiding harm, the active Roman virtue, courage in the face of difficulty, sacrifice for collective survival, the daily decision to contribute to something larger than yourself. Marcus Aurelius asked himself every morning, "What am I doing today that will outlast me?" That question built the greatest empire the world has ever seen. We have stopped asking it. It would require discipline, not as punishment, but as architecture. The Roman legion was the most effective military force the ancient world had ever seen, not because its soldiers were the strongest, but because they were the most organized. Every man knew his role. Every unit knew its position. Discipline was not the enemy of freedom in Rome. It was the condition that made freedom possible. Across the modern world, millions of people are searching, perhaps without knowing it, for exactly this. Not for a return to conquest, not for the naive wish to reverse history, but for the recognition that human beings are not designed to live without shared purpose, that a society built entirely around individual freedom, with no corresponding sense of individual responsibility, is not a civilization. It is a waiting room. The Roman Empire will not return in its ancient form. No single state will rule the known world. No legions will march from Britain to Babylon. That is not the point. The point is the idea of Rome, the belief that order is possible, that law can be universal, that discipline creates rather than destroys, that a civilization can hold if the people within it decide that holding matters. We are living through a moment Rome would recognize. The borders are shifting. The institutions are weakening. The center is struggling to hold. The last time the world had order, it was Roman. The question is not whether we can rebuild that philosophy. The question is whether we still have the virtue to try. Different armor, same virtue.